Welcome back. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone on AYV. Don't forget to send your comments and questions to the Africa Young Voices Media Empire Facebook page, and we'll take them as we move along with today's edition of the program.
Right now, each year, the International Day of Peace is observed around the world on September 21. The United Nations General Assembly declared the day as a way of devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. This year's Peace Day is themed Recovering Better for an Equitable and Sustainable World. To look at the relevance of the day in Sierra Leone, with us in the studio, we've been joined by John Coker, Executive Director of Fumble Talk International, and Charles Lahai, a peace expert. Good morning and welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Let me start off with you, John. I know you've been in communities across the country trying to reconcile communities and trying to ensure that peace becomes the hallmark in what you do. Sierra Leone last year was ranked 136 globally, and now I think we're at 146, with regards to the status of our peace. Where does that put peace as we talk about the day itself in Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much for having me. You know, we slipped 10 points. During the last 12 months. I think there are several factors that, that we can attribute to that slip. I think one of the major factors is the political tension. And it seems as if a lot of people will confirm that we still have the root causes of the conflict with us in Sierra Leone that led to the war. And as a nation, we've gone through the TRC. They've identified most of these issues, and they came up with recommendations. But most of these recommendations are not being implemented within the spirit of the TRC.
Right.
So even though there are some efforts, but it's not been done within the spirit of peace. And I think when you go around the country, the issue of communication, the political tension in villages, even the appointment of chiefs, the section chiefs, headmen, it's a problem. Even things like youth chairmen, women leaders, these are all factors that when you aggregate them, you are bound to slip down the rank. However, there are some efforts. We appreciate the setting up of the Peace Commission, the Independent Peace Commission. I was expecting more from them a day like today. And I've not seen much. I don't know why. But fortunately, my friend and colleague is here. I would love to know more about what they are doing, because this is the opportunity for the Peace Commission to tell us what's their plan, what's their strategy. They say it's Independent Peace Commission. So where are we on that? Overall, I just want to end by saying, a day like today is for reflection, not to cast blame. So what we are doing as an organization is we are appealing to the conscience of Sierra Leoneans to say, look at yourself. What have you done to contribute to peace in your community, in your workspace, nationwide? So we all have a role to play. The politicians, the journalists, the vendors out there, the market women, we all have a role to play. And that is the message we would like to share across the country, that don't just look at governments, don't just look at the Peace Commission. What can you do as a Sierra Leonean, as an individual, to consolidate the peace so we will move up the rank?
All right. You mentioned political tension is responsible for where we are. Going to the different communities, what are the stories? What are people telling you, in terms of what are the reasons for what we experience, the violence and the peace we continue to struggle with in maintaining?
One major cause is actually the appointment of chiefs, youth chairmen, section chiefs. Most of these people are not elected. And people, some of the paramount chiefs even think it is their right to appoint section chiefs or town chiefs. And when you aggregate that, it's recipe for chaos. I mean, I don't want to name chiefdoms, but we are working in several places where it is a major concern. And we've brought that to the attention of the Director of Local Government, who has confirmed that this is within the Act. There should be some process. The election of section chief is similar to the election of a paramount chief. So that gives you the authority to administer justice. But if you're appointed by an individual, you work for that individual. And also the business community, the mining sector, a lot is happening there that is unseen. I will encourage you, the media, to move out of Freetown, go to places like, I don't want to name names, but like Lower Banta. There are several issues. I was there 2 weeks ago. There was murder, about 2 cases there that have not been investigated. And how they use the resources from the mining companies has not been transparent. And there are a lot of problems. And I think the members of parliament also are somehow disconnected with their constituent members. I'm not saying they should go there to resolve these issues, but their presence will give confidence to the people. Their presence, just meeting and greeting their members. Yeah. I think it will go a long way, but it's not been happening in most places. I'm not saying all, but in most places. And we've seen the last couple of months, this political tension is brewing up. So I wonder what will happen in the next 1 year. Right. We have to work very hard, even to maintain that ranking. But with all this political tension, what happened over the weekend, the different elections across the country, it's a cause for concern. And we want to appeal to the government, to the opposition, to civil society, to the journalists, everyone. Let's see what we can do to sustain this peace.
Now, Sierra Leone is a post-conflict country. And you mentioned something which is very important, and we've seen in several reports over the years that some of the causes, the initial causes of the civil conflict are still existent within our society. And one would think that, countrymen, citizens would have learned a lesson and would sort of implement a behavior change when it comes to maintaining peace and national cohesion. But as you've mentioned, across the board, when you go across the country, you see similar patterns of behavior. You talk about the appointments of leaders, the appointments of chiefs, section chiefs, youth leads, and it's very worrying. Is it a matter of us not learning a lesson, or are people just behaving in a way that suits their current circumstances?
I would say you said it all, but I'll add, yes, most people dance to the tune of their current circumstances. It's in their interest. But I think part of the problem is we always look at ourselves, individuals. What is there for us? What is there for me? And at the end of the day, what is there for you will not be translated to your kids. What is there for you will not be translated to the next generation. It's what have you done for Sierra Leone? What's your contribution? And what's your contribution morally within your community? Sometimes we tend to focus more on these big jobs, minister, directors. But there are people out there, even in our offices, without the cleaner. If the cleaner does not report to work today, you will realize the importance of that person. So it has to be collective. And I think, from the top, president has a role to play. The president and his cabinet, they all have a role to play. Members of parliament, they all have a role to play. Let them lead by example. Let them create the enabling environment for people to think that, yes, I have a role. Let people plug into the national development. But if I think, I have nothing to gain, then you just do what you want to do. So we look up to them, we'll appeal to them to create an enabling environment. They are in government. They have to lead, and we all follow.
I will bring Charles into the conversation with that question as to whether the government has created the enabling environment. I mean, structurally, we see strides in that area. We've seen the Peace Commission, we've seen the Council for Civic Education. All of these instruments are coming on board to play their own part. But looking at it from the layman's point of view up to the average Sierra Leonean who perhaps is in the market, to teachers, to everybody within the Sierra Leonean community when it comes to peace and cohesion, is there the enabling environment for peace to thrive?
I think my friend has couched it out, a lot more carefully. And, the presence of peace does not justify the absence of, guns. And there are fundamental systems and procedures and processes that needs to be instilled into our society before we can actually begin to have a feel of a peaceful atmosphere. Institutional building is all not enough in promoting peace and national cohesion. What is also more important is ensuring that we are able as a nation to overcome the challenges that we face within our democratic state development model. In addition to that, it is also essential that we as a people are enlightened enough to understand where we want to go and how we get there. So the establishment of the Independent Commission for Peace and National Cohesion, like my friend Riley said, may not be enough all by itself if we fail to create an enabling environment. And what's that enabling environment? We must ensure that the necessary systems and structures are in place. We also must ensure that the leadership is sound. We must also ensure that there is confidence and trust building. We also must fundamentally look at the residual TRC processes, like he rightly said. So all of these put together tells you and I that there is need to move towards building peace and national cohesion. And I must say that we now have a kind of a new wind of change, that institutions are coming up. You just talked about the National Council for Civic Education and Development, which fundamentally deals with, civic rights and civic responsibilities. You talked about the establishment, you and John talked about the establishment of the Independent Commission for Peace and National Cohesion, which is a new commission that has just been established. I think one thing we must now, advocate for is to have the buy-in of citizens, the buy-in of political parties, the buy-in of key stakeholders, our multilateral partners, the buy-in of government, to ensure that it becomes a people-centered and a people-led process. So whatever we do, we all have contributions to make to promote peace. And if you look at the theme of this year's commemoration or celebration, fostering
recovering better.
Recovering better for an equitable and sustainable world.
Development.
What does that tell us? It actually tells us that something at the global level has gone wrong. There's a fundamental need for the globe to come together. We have suffered and we are still continuing to suffer the global pandemic of the COVID-19. And if you read or listened to the UN Secretary General's message, he is encouraging everybody to use peace as a way of moving forward.
Charles, let me put this into context. You, the experts, have submitted to us that what we are enjoying is a negative peace. and the things, the indicators that led to the 11 years brutal civil war are still present today in Sierra Leone. So if we are to get those things right, what should be done? You look at the justice sector, which, I mean, if you go back to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, you look at justice, you look at lack of equitable distribution of state resources, marginalization of minority groups, over-centralization of the economy and political power. These are things that are still present today in Sierra Leone. How can we get it right? Especially when the latest fragility report puts Sierra Leone as one of the most fragile countries.
You know, I must agree with you that fragile states can be susceptible to, you know, unsustainability. But I also must subscribe that as a nation, we are making strides to overcome those challenges. You talked about equitable distribution of wealth, of resources.
Right.
You talked about equal opportunities. Okay, and I would love to pick them one by one, perhaps. Sometime this year, the African Peer Review Mechanism conducted a targeted review on Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone fell among 4 nations, 4 countries in the continent that was selected for a targeted review, for a peer review. And the report was launched sometime last month by no less a person but His Excellency, the Honorable Vice President. And in that report, there are fundamental recommendations that has now been translated into our national plan of action. And when you look at the medium-term development plan, it captures some of those recommendations. Okay, which means that Sierra Leone has given herself up for a peer review within the context of what is called health governance and COVID-19 response. So other nations are going to be learning from Sierra Leone. That's one step that we have taken to move forward. The second step I would want to talk about is our education sector. Okay, before now, I mean, opportunities were quite limited. I must commend the current Minister of, Basic and Senior Education, okay, that parents are not going to be running helter-skelter to get scratch cards when results are out, when public results are out, okay, which means also that, WAEC is not going to be taking money from parents as a result of that. So all you need is to take your mobile phone and then send your message, and then your results are out. I think bringing technology into education also means that we are moving forward. Okay. The third I will talk about is the civil society landscape. Regardless of the fact that there are lots of challenges, but I think civil society is also moving forward, okay, in terms of building peace and promoting national cohesion.
Is that the case? I want you to let me ask this question. When you say civil society plays, I mean, you guys, your fraternity plays a crucial role in moving the peace forward. Another school of thought holds that some of you are the problems. I mean, civil society actors. Some of you are the problems for where we are because, I mean, the issue of coloration or taking sides politically, again, has advanced us, putting us where we are in terms of, I mean, the peace, our peace status. So do you consider yourselves, I mean, the entire community as people moving the state of peace to a sustainable path, or you're trying to break in that peace and, I mean, create problems for your own gains? Okay,
let me recalibrate, and I have to be very tactical when I'm talking about civil society.
Go ahead,
because I mean I am in a transition, okay,
yeah,
and I think I am enjoying the transition. But I must say that civil society needs to be commended for the role that they played in the peace process and the role that they still continue to play. Fambutok, for example, I mean, is doing quite a wonderful job.
Right.
The organization I was working for, PASET, has done a lot in promoting peace and indigenous reconciliation. Okay, what is important now is how do we cement the gaps that continues to exist? Yes, civil society has their flaws, but these things exist everywhere. What we want to see is how do we surge on our minds to move forward? How do we ensure that everybody has a role to play? He just said it. How do we ensure that everybody has a role to play? Okay. How do we ensure that we are not building our democracy on ethnic backgrounds? How do we ensure that it does not matter which political party it belongs to, but when it comes to governance, it must be participatory and inclusive? Okay, so these are the fundamental steps that we should be talking about. So everything we should do, we must ensure that we do it with compassion, that we must do it with confidence and trust, that we must see our own roles in promoting peace and national cohesion. Right. And that we do not want to step back into where we are coming from. You rightly said, I mean, some of the factors that, you know, precipitated the war, I mean, youth marginalization, corruption, right, you know, systemic corruption, you know, bad governance, etc., etc. But I think we are moving forward. We are making efforts, you know, to address some of those fundamental challenges. And until and unless the institutions that are responsible, you know, to take the responsibility, I mean, to take the mantle of leadership forward, know exactly what they do, how they do it, and for whom they do it, I think Sierra Leone would continue to face the challenges. All right. But given the fact now that there are institutions that are responsible to take those processes forward, civil society also is placed in a position where, you know, it does not fall into a political juncture trap, like he said. I mean, we have to take responsibility for what we do and how we do it.
All right, continue to stay with us. I just want to use the opportunity to welcome Valnora Edwin into the studio. She's in our studio too. But before we throw over a question to you, let's just hear from people outside, people in Freetown, what they think about the status of peace in Sierra Leone.
In the first place, we give thanks and appreciation to the international community for the world peace, because most times that they help we for initiate the peace. And now, the peace, for example, and they put out on the Leone country, Sierra Leone, very, very paramount. Because during the odd days when they get war, nobody not been able to do anything better for himself. Everybody, people in the one helter skelter, going places away and on. But thank God, the peace is here and we for maintenance.
Salone are the most peacefulest country. We not get to about Salone peaceful. You go other country, then go molest you, then go this, and Salone first we like foreigners. Whilst other country where you go there as foreigner, then go treat you bad. So Salone are the most peacefulest country. We not get to about we like we say.
I think about the peace. Maybe my own view is different from your view. You understand? Maybe my own view is why the thing of peace, because fête no day. Fête no day, draw no day. Now that it's not in the country for now, where they make people they run away, or people they go inside us. So now that me take a peace. So I'm not saying let's get it for now.
Well, we still go talk to our governments, but let them go put more efforts, more especially on the security sectors, because the security apparatus are facing na the whole, na the and the peace, the more. If the security sectors, they intensive view, I feel we will get peace.
Right, welcome back. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone on AYV television. You just heard the voices of Freetonians on what they think about peace and what peace means to them here in Sierra Leone. Welcome once more, Valnora Edwin, to the conversation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Right, I'm sure you've been following the conversation here, and we've just been discussing first of all, whether there is indeed the existence of peace, and whether what are the things that seem to threaten peace and national cohesion here in Sierra Leone. And you've been someone who has been outspoken when it comes to good governance, and it's only right that we bring into the conversation. Now, the setting up of the Peace Commission has been an integral part of this process, and there have been several conversations around that. Now, do you believe that this commission would be instrumental in perhaps maintaining the peace and improving national cohesion in Sierra Leone?
For certain reasons, I would like to be very specific on that. But what I will say generally, I do endorse what my colleague mentioned, that you certainly do need institutions that could foster peace. But this institution in itself cannot foster peace. There has to be several processes that needs to unfold, and they have alluded to some of them. You look at the judiciary, you look at the justice sector generally, you have to look at the economy, you have to look at opportunities, choices, how our democracy works, whether we adhere to good governance principles basically. We look at police response to riots, access to resources, access to job opportunities, the way we do our politics, the winner-takes-all mentality. All these issues affect our ratings or how we consider peace. And peace is something we need to define, in fact, as a nation. Because for some, even listening to the public, they will tell you, oh, there are no guns, so probably that makes us peaceful. But for somebody else, the fact that they cannot have basic access to livelihood, they don't have jobs, the fact that they're looking out for scholarship for their kids, the fact that armed robbery seems to be a problem, the fact that issues around sexual and gender-based violence are prevailing. For them, it's not a peaceful environment. And even when you look at the SDG 16, because it directly speaks to peace processes, it says peace, justice, peace, and strong institutions. When you look at what SDG 16 prescribes, it shows that we need to have a safe environment, you need to go to sleep peacefully at night, you need to ensure issues around women's rights issues, torture, trafficking, illicit financial flows, the economy, and also ensuring that even these institutions that are established are independent. Because if an individual is aggrieved and they need to access, whether it would be the Human Rights Commission, the Peace Commission, the Anti-Corruption Commission, they go to the police, and the feedback or their experience is not satisfactory. These are all small triggers. And even when you listen, you hear concerns around chieftaincy, if you go to that level, whether amalgamated or the amalgamated chiefdoms, it's an issue. There are prevailing issues around the farmers and the herdsmen in Cambia and Koinadugu. These are issues that could bring internal unrest and strife. So the institutions are there, but if they are not effective, if they are not allowed to function independently, and citizens can have access and feel that they have been recognized as citizens and given the required dignity, it affects what we would consider as peace.
Right, that's a great submission there. But I'd like to bring the conversation back to us here in the studio with Charles Lahai. Now, the Peace Commission you mentioned, which is why I asked Valnora, you know, you said it's about bringing people on board and making it a national process, making the institution one that represents Sierra Leoneans, one that is for Sierra Leoneans. Do you think that the entire the motivation behind forming the Peace Commission has been undermined by, you know, what people have been, the critics that have been coming up when it comes to the setting up of this commission?
I think it will be too early to start being judgmental about that. But what I would say is that over the years, there has been increased effort, increased clamor for the establishment of an infrastructure for peace. And now that, you know, the institution has been set up, I think what we should be concerned about is how do we all pull together as a nation to support the institution to thrive? What contributions can we make to ensure that the institution serves the purpose? What can we do as a nation to ensure that we do not undermine the credibility of the institution? Because, I mean, like my colleague said, we are getting closer to elections. And for me, I think these are the fundamentals we should look at. How can we support the Peace Commission to ensure that, it surmounts the challenges of reinforcing our democracy?
Right.
So that's what I will say. I mean, I want to be very specific on the topic of the day. But what I want to emphasize is the fact that we have all been clamoring for the establishment of the Peace Commission, and now the Peace Commission has been established. It's a new commission. It has just been set up, and I think we should all be concerned about pushing it forward to ensure that it meets its mandate.
Let me ask John this question. John, I know you're looking forward to seeing more from the Peace Commission, especially with regards this day. But you submitted earlier that, especially when we're moving towards election, and getting representations of the people across the country, I mean, that has posed some serious challenge where paramount chiefs think they should select or appoint section chiefs, youth leaders. Moving into the process of elections, what should be done, especially with regards to your community healing processes? What should be done to ensure that we're able to put structures in place to avert any potential threats to the peace?
Well, allow me to just say something about the Peace Commission,
Go ahead.
please. It's unfortunate I have to say this today because I think the Peace Commission has a lot to do, but I will say they've missed a golden opportunity. It does not mean they will not recover, but the ownership, of the Peace Commission, people were not involved. When I remember how we set up the Human Rights Commission, it was a people's-led process. Nomination of commissioners went through public vetting, but these were all appointed. So what's the role of the people? I'm not crying them down, but they have a task to prove to us that they are able to respond to the challenges. So that's a missed opportunity. However, I wish them luck to really come back to us to prove that they are there and they can address the challenges come 2023. Now, the election, I'm really concerned. I will say every Sierra Leonean that is involved in peace processes should be having sleepless nights at this point in time. Because the root causes, the potential for violence is still out there. I talked about communication. Communication to me is the watchword. People are just left out there. They just do what they want to do. They assume what is happening. There is little or no communication. For the central government, we think by talking on radio, giving interviews or television, that's communication. It's a one-way communication. What we need is series of town hall meetings. Let us have dialogue sessions across the country. Take what you are doing to the people. Have the members of parliament, have councillors, have the traditional leaders. Let them talk to their subject. Have big town hall meetings of stakeholders. Let them raise the issues. You will be surprised that most of what the people want is not like millions of dollars. Sometimes it's just to see their member of parliament. Because like in one community, they told me, look, the MP, when he was campaigning, he was meeting us in our farms, talking to us to vote for them. Now we've not seen him since his election. What does that mean? There's a gap. So all they think is That man is flooding in money, not knowing that there are challenges. So let us have the opportunity. A day like today should be a day of reflection. Let's talk. Talking will not harm anyone, but it's like it's freeing your mind. We say blow mind. It's important. We don't have that space. And my worry is, if we get into 2023, as we are presently, I'm worried.
Let me ask you, John, what's your role in all of this as civil society organizations to ensure that we're able to bring all the players together? I know there was this forum established between yourself and the government. What happened to that particular forum?
The government's CSO dialogue?
Yes.
I mean, I have to be very honest with you and the viewers. I even checked with the office yesterday, with the office of the vice president yesterday. And I was told that, yes, they've had the resources now, an event will be organized shortly. But it's like, the program was launched last year.
Right.
You know, so 9 months, no dialogue. We're not only talking about that type of dialogue. What we need is take the government, take what the commissions are doing, go meet the people in their villages, give them the opportunity to feel that they are part of Sierra Leone. Let them don't just think, oh, they are in Freetown, they do what they want to do. That is the major challenge. We need to create that enabling environment for them to feel that they are part of Sierra Leone. They have a say in the governance process. And I think this is where we'll have to judge the Peace Commission and other existing commissions. What are they doing?
Right. Let me just bring in Valnor before we take a few messages. Now, do you subscribe to this, theory, I would call it, the gap between the governed and those in governance? And do you think there exists right now the enabling environment for peace?
I think I do, and there's a lot we need to do to catch up. The Open Government Initiative was a process that tried to address that, so that in all areas, geographical location and sectors, they could have the opportunity to engage with their elected officials. Because mind you, the elected officials, public officials need to know that they are servants of the people, and they need to have a discussion. To be accountability is explaining what have you done, why did you make that decision, and etc., etc. But that is not the case. What you normally see, in fact, when you have these visits, especially in places beyond Freetown, you see all the dancing and the masquerading of masked devils, and you know it belittles or it discards what the important discussion should be. So there should be mechanisms where information, and that is why we talk about access to information. It's not just about even having the media. As John rightly said, it's about town hall meetings, because there are some areas where they cannot see AYV, they cannot hear radio stations, or if they're hearing radio stations, it belongs to another country. So how do you meet the people? And I do recall some years ago, whilst at Campaign for Good Governance, we organized constituency outreach, where we would take MPs to their constituency, and the storyline was the same. They would tell you when they were campaigning, they were going across riverine areas. They were being met in the farms, in the schools, in the parks. But as soon as they're elected, they would complain, oh, the villages are far away. It's difficult to go across. I need a boat. And so the citizens have no clue what their MPs are doing. Bills are passed, contracts are approved, no clue. And certainly they do have the perception that these MPs have a lot of money. That this because the MP campaigned using an Okada, and when he visits, he has a FJ Cruiser. So they think, wow, something has happened. And they start making demands. So you hear the MP saying, when we do make these visits, they make so much demands. But if you were campaigning with an Okada, and a year after you are now with an FJ Cruiser, the layman will certainly think something else has happened. So certainly there needs to be innovative ways, various ways, where elected officials need to actively interact with their citizens. And what John said about the CSO government dialogue, I think that was a good initiative, and it's very, very unfortunate that with so many things unfolding, almost a year after, we are still thinking of whether there's going to be another dialogue or
Okay.
we are not going to have another dialogue.
Just quickly before we take a new summary, let me ask you just a question, John. The fear when a VAT forum was established was that, I mean, it was a technique by government to narrow the space so that, I mean, they can just buy all of you guys in. And you've gone for almost a year without coming out, telling or engaging the public. Did that not justify the claim that the public had?
Well, I would say, you know, it's less than a year.
Right.
First, I have to commend the government for taking that bold step. It was a bold step. But maybe someone told them, are you prepared for this? And then they have a second thought. But I also encourage them. Look, it's the only way out. It's the only way out. As a government, you have 5 years. You have 10 years. But CSOs are here. We engage with the people. It's important to sit down and talk. That will lead to government responding to the needs of people. We say demand and supply.
Right.
Now, if you look at what the government is spending huge amount of money on, you know, sometimes you say, are they aware that in this community, they just need a fraction of this? But they don't know. The MP or the councillor or who's the person that is responsible to bring that information to them, it's not been heard.
Right.
But with CSO dialogue, we'll talk, we'll raise issues. We are not on their pay list.
All right.
Continue to stay with us.
Yes, we'll come to you
back.
shortly.
But welcome back. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone. We're still discussing the International Peace Day here in our studios, and we have with us peace experts and civil society activists. And we're going to take some messages from our Facebook page that our guests will respond to in order to round up the conversation. Samuel.
All right, Samuel, trust me, I totally support your guests in the studio that one of the major problems that is affecting our peace in this country is the too much political tensions and always occurring after elections. Because some of our political leaders in this country always preach hate messages to their supporters against their opponents. And also the issue of winner takes it all in our country is also another big problem in our country that is always our peace in the country. Because if the opposition has a say in any governance system in a country by providing some ministerial position to them, trust the issue of political tension will be a thing of the past. From Boss earlier, Duazak or some context saying with sincere unity, freedom and justice for all, there will be peace amongst all Sierra Leoneans, and that's what exactly the current government is doing. Zainab Yebu Kanu is saying, I live in London and I am always excited to come home every year, but when I think about the water crisis, that speaks to the water issue. It breaks my heart to fixing water and light in that country. I'm happy, Jabati Mambu, it's a compliment that for John. If my memory can serve me well, the amount of money that was and has been spent on peace sensitization around the country is huge, and nothing has been vividly achieved. Saluna Tokwilek. And the final message is from Kande Ture. These commissions and civil societies will not bring peace in Sierra Leone if the government of the day is unwilling to allow fair play. National cohesion is a role only the government can perform unless civil societies are willing to challenge the status quo. So many messages, but those are the ones we will take.
Right, okay. Interesting comments from our viewers. Most of them seem to agree with everything you've said here. But the question now is, how do we foster sustainable peace going forward? Election year is coming up soon, and relatively speaking, when we look at the kind of peace Sierra Leone has compared to other countries, we don't seem to be doing badly, but there continues to be threats to the efforts, not only civil society organizations, but also citizens generally are making in order to maintain peace. So how do we foster sustainable peace going forward? I throw the question over to you, John.
Thank you very much. And as one of the viewers said, it's only the government that can create the enabling environment for us to have sustained peace. And once we have sustained peace, we'll have sustained development. So in terms of what the government should do, I think, yes, they made the first step by establishing the Peace Commission. But is it just to establish the Peace Commission? I think the government should support the Peace Commission. They should support them with the political will, with the resources for them to implement their strategy. We will carefully watch the Peace Commission. We will not be, just endorsing what they are saying. We will challenge them where necessary. But we want to be critical partners of the Peace Commission. And again, as a government, I think the government should open up the space a little bit for CSOs. For some of us who've been out there for a while, within the CSO community, we are fading away now. We're creating the space for the younger guys to come up. One issue we've discussed years back is, I think it's not that bad to have a civil society fund. Because for now, how many CSOs are able to raise their rent? How many CSOs are able to pay for audit? How many CSOs are able to pay their staff? And they will tell you they are CSOs. But we have to survive. So I think the government should create the space to have a fund that CSOs can apply for. Now, with all what's happening around the world, there is little room for us to apply for funds outside of Sierra Leone. Things are hard. But if we create that space, we've seen that in other parts of the world. The money we are using here.
Just to interject, do you think that would create the enabling space for peace, or would that only foster more confusion, given that, there's the saying which goes, you do not bite the hand that feeds you?
No.
Would that sort of stifle civil society organizations not to speak against things that
it's how you go about it. It's how you go about it. In other parts of the world, there are funds that people can apply for. That does not mean you will compromise. But the reality is, when you don't have that fund, then you compromise. Because if you don't have the fund to pay your rent, it's getting to the 10th month, what do? You go to either the opposition, or you go to the government, start to say nice things that they want to hear, and you ask them for a bailout. But if we have a constructive funding system, even like a CSO house, it's part of our money. It's our taxpayers' money. We are an important part of the governance process.
Right.
So we should look into that. Because someone said, too much talk.
Yeah.
And I believe we will continue to talk, because there are issues that are emerging all the time. And we have to dialogue. We have to engage. So there's nothing like too much talk. We'll have to continue to engage. We'll have to continue to raise issues. And where the government is doing well, I think it's also good for us to say kudos to the government.
Right.
And if they're not able to perform, we should also draw their attention. Like now we are yearning for the next CSO government dialogue. We hope it will happen very soon.
All right. Charles, what would be your final submission on the matter?
I will say that peace and development starts with strategic visioning. No country develops by coincidence or by accident. And in order for Sierra Leone to protect and to promote peace and national cohesion, we must understand that national cohesion leads nations to pull together. A cohesive nation pulls together in the same direction. What is essential is understanding what our values are: compassion, unity in diversity, participation in governance, access to justice, and also making sure that, mind you, I talked about the residual TRC processes. The TRC made fundamental recommendations, and the Peace Commission, in order for the Peace Commission to be effective and efficient in its work, it also has to ensure that it gets back to those residual issues. And so for us to start, I'm coming back to my colleague, for us to start judging the newly established Peace Commission when the Peace Commission has not even been taken to the people, I just said that it's going to be a people-led process. And in order to make it a people-led process, people have to understand what their roles are in pushing forward to meet the mandate of the commission. Number two, we also have to ensure that, we still have issues with policies. Okay, so policy formulations and providing advisory services are all issues we should be thinking about. And in order to commemorate this year's celebration of the International Peace Day, we need to understand that something has been going on wrong fundamentally at the global level. How do we move out of that? What efforts has government made or other governments around the globe made to ensure that we promote peace at all levels? So the cultures of peace has to be enhanced. If we are talking about issues around structural violence has always been there. And it is still there. So how do we support the peace infrastructure? How do we support the Peace Commission to address those issues of structural violence? I mean, making sure that there's an interplay between the police and the communities, that institutions are strengthened enough to provide the services that the law provides, okay, and that citizens themselves can participate in the processes. So the last thing I would want to talk about is, visionary leadership. I think in order for Sierra Leone to move on, we have to ensure that the leadership is smart, that the leadership is supported in a way that places it on a platform that does not fuel the argument around ethnicity or around regionalism. So peace and national cohesion, as a final say, peace and national cohesion must instill the concept of moving together in the right direction as a nation and understanding our differences, that there is always unity in diversity.
Right, thank you.
All right. Valnora, you're closing.
Yes, I think the issue about promoting peace does not only rest with the government. I think this is where it also concerns citizens, and this is where civil society comes in, because this is where we provide, someone was saying it's just about talking, but that's our key role, and that's what we bring out to the public domain outside, being part and parcel of policy discussions. But the key thing there is, how do citizens push for change? If we cannot leave all the decisions to only political leadership. We need to see leadership emerge in different sectors across the board. And if we're complaining about some of the gaps in the government, now we're approaching elections. Who are the people who vote? Who are the ones who make the decisions? Who are the people who send the negative feeds on the social media? Who are the media houses that encourage negative conversations? It's the ordinary citizens. So if we really want to push for peace, as citizens, leadership needs to emerge, whether it's from the civil society front, from the private sector, from the religious bodies, across the board, to say this is the agenda. Over time, we have been speaking around what is the vision of Sierra Leone. Where do we want to be as a nation? That is one thing that we need to imbibe. That is something we need to work towards, because when you have a common vision, in as much as there are differences, you will see that at the end, that is what would motivate you to move forward. So until we start having that conversation, and I'm hopeful that the Peace Commission, the National Commission for Democracy, the NACID, these are institutions that can start that civic education, that conversation that will help Sierra Leoneans to know that we need to have a vision. Leadership needs to come from across the board, not just political leadership, and we have to define the sort of politics we want in our country.
All right, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation this morning. We'll end this segment here, and just to spice up your day, we'll give you some facts to, broaden your horizon. Stay tuned. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone.